Day 328 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine today. And so we'll head over to the Russian military losses, start off there for the day. And currently, Russia is sitting on 116,950 Russian military personnel losses, which represents an additional 870 Russian losses in the past 24 hours. Now, I could easily spend an extra 10 minutes a day specifically clarifying all of the surrounding elements that make these numbers what they are, but that's not exactly a viable approach for a daily update video. So today I'll just quickly mention a couple of quick things here. And first of all, the reason why I mention these numbers is just to give you an idea of the exhaustion or the ongoing exhaustion of the Russian forces. And also note, interestingly, both Russia and Ukraine don't in fact publicize their own losses numbers, as it's actually just a common practice not to disclose these figures during war or during wartime. So what happens instead, as unusual as it may sound, is that the opposing wartime parties report on each other's side's stats in this case. And Ukraine takes a conservative approach with its numbers. It has to. Whereas Russia, on the other hand, would actually post their numbers if they A, produced them as daily updates, and B, more importantly, if they were found to be verifiably honest with their figures. But when Russia's top-level military spokesperson, Igor Korsnolan, not to be confused with film director Christopher Nolan, states outrageous claims constantly, such as 70 Bayraktars were destroyed when Ukraine only had 38 of them at the time, or when he said 40 HIMARS systems were destroyed when Ukraine only had about 14 of them delivered to Ukraine at the time, or most recently when Igor said that 4 Bradley IFVs, infantry fighting vehicles, were taken out when they hadn't even yet been delivered to Ukraine. So it means I have zero faith in Russia's figures for reporting purposes. And unfortunately, this pseudo-reality that Russia currently lives in is unlikely to change anytime soon. But the best part is these quote-unquote Russian successes get reported up the military chain of command all the way to Putin himself, giving him a false sense of security, thereby leading Putin to say things like, let the Patriot systems come, Russia will knock them out. Which I've got to say, militarily speaking, in some respects, Russia believes it's fighting an entirely different type of war. But anyhow, back to the stats. So Russian hardware losses for today. So 3 tanks, 11 ACVs, 5 artillery, and even a few MLRSs. So the multiple launch rocket systems. Then we'll move back to the map and we'll start out in Russia again. In this time, particularly in the oblast of Belgorod, where air defenses were quite active in the last 24 hours right here. It was in fact reported that there were very large numbers of explosions occurring in the region, but there's nothing really photographic as yet to back that one up. Then we'll move into the Ukraine map, in particular to the Donbas, where Putin has instructed the new incoming army commander, Gerasimov, to seize the remainder of the Donbas by March. Which is quite unfortunate because Putin demanded this from all of the other generals that previously held the position who failed to achieve that outcome. Then we'll move more specifically into the Donbas on the map to, somewhere in the north where the battle for Novoselivska, so zoom in right there, continued late into the night. And as a result, the AFU destroyed a T-90M in Kazimivka, right next door. And so the Swedish-sourced AT-4s, priced at around $1,500 a piece, were reportedly used for the knockout. For a tank that costs about $4 million a unit, and even then, Russian production lines are painfully slow. That is if they were even looking to replace it with another T-90 tank at all. Then we'll move a bit further down. It seems to be good news, but we do have to see, however, at Kreminna, if I can find that one there. So the AFU has developed something today just north of Kreminna. News will come out once it's safe, but some rumors suggest that the AFU is in the city center of Kreminna, although as current, that's actually probably more of a rumor than anything, but fighting is certainly very close to the town. Then we'll move down a bit to Soledar, where Russia took control of the northwestern Sil train station. We need to zoom in for this one. So here we go. You can somewhat see it right there. So it's pretty consistent with the this protrusion here, this Russian protrusion, with the actual markings where the train station is. In fact, I'll just switch across to satellite view that I don't do that often, and we'll zoom in and we can see a whole plethora of train lines there. But interestingly, in the last 24 hours or so, Ukraine have reported that the Ukrainian army still maintains some positions in Soledar. So we'll zoom out, as it appears that some recon units still scout the area and strike Russians inside the town. All whilst simultaneously the AFU has taken new defensive positions on higher ground to the west, and for instance the west-north of the settlement, which will make further Russian advances difficult, to say the least. Oh, and also things were a bit spicy here today as warehouses and ammo dumps were destroyed by Ukraine's 45th Air Assault Brigade. Then we'll move a bit down to Bakhmut, where Russia is really creeping in from the north and the south. If we have a look at the date map here, so it's not going to look too great, but there we go, particularly from the south there today. So making some small gains there, small but notable gains as they continue their encirclement tactics or attempts. But you know what? Today let's take it from a really recent update from one of the AFU soldiers in Bakhmut at the front line themselves. So throwing up the video here, but paraphrasing here what he's actually saying for Bakhmut. So he mentions Russian forces are creeping in from the flanks and directly from the front as well. Also that Ukrainian artillery is still doing its job. He also speaks firsthand of how Russia takes a barbaric approach with throwing so much cannon fodder into the meat grinder or to slaughter, as he puts it. He also mentions lots of prisoners are included in this barbaric approach as well, so the Wagner prisoners. He also goes on to say that at the start of the war, the situation was much worse, where Ukraine had less military equipment, such as vehicles and other heavy armor, but goes on to say Ukraine is a lot more prepared now, and everyone is doing their job, the infantry, artillery, reconnaissance groups, special forces, mortars, tanks, and other Ukrainian brigades. And he ends with a hopeful message of saying everything will be Ukraine. Oh, and he also used the word Orchistan, which you don't hear very often, which is another word for Russia, and naturally another Lord of the Rings style Tolkien reference. And just lastly, close enough to Bakhmut in the south, so Klishchivka, here we go, is disputed ground as Russia throws its forces into battle there as well. Although I've got to say, from what I've seen, it doesn't look that promising for the Ukrainian side this week. Then we'll move a bit further down on the map and have a look at Kartiska, where fire and explosions were reported. Just have to find this one on the map. It's just east of Makivka. So here it is, hiding right there. Might zoom back out for a bit of context. So there we go. And it appears to be a Ukrainian strike arrival somewhere in the center near the central railway station, which would make sense, taking out the logistics hubs. Something that Russia very much needs to continue its war efforts. Then we'll move across on the map to Zaporizhzhia, the partially occupied oblast there. In Tokmak. So here we go, where at least 6 big explosions were noted in occupied Tokmak in an area where reportedly Russian forces were based. We're waiting for visuals with more confirmations on that one, but so far it's shaping up to sound like a Makivka 2.0, if you will, based on some of those earlier reports. Then, not too far away, there was also some explosions noted in occupied Berdyansk, so right here, which is a place that is no stranger to having Russian bases, airfields, and ammunition dumps hit by Ukraine on a fairly regular basis. And all we have is this hazy photo so far, but initially what Russia did was push back its lines of, no, not so much defense, but it's lines of where they place their ammunition dumps. They stage some of their headquarters, their military bases, to get away from things like HIMARS or other means of long-range strike capabilities that Ukraine has. But it's Berdyansk always seems to have been in strike range capability for Ukraine, even though it does appear to be 90-100 kilometers across, which is about 55-60 miles or so. But it just cannot get far away enough from the front line to be safe from Ukrainian strikes either way. Then we'll move across to the Kherson Oblast, where in Velika Lepetika. So here it is, right nearby this Oinky Pig. So just like in Makivka as well, Russian forces stationed themselves in a former school. They were targeted, and the first and second floors are on fire. Casualties or casualty numbers are not known at this point. Then to follow that one up, a Russian position in occupied Oleshki was targeted as well. So this is the one that you know quite well, constantly getting targeted from the north side where the Ukrainian forces are stationed. Then we'll move across to some news for the day. So around 100 Ukrainian soldiers arrived in the United States training base in Oklahoma, where they will be trained to use the Patriot air defense systems. And add to that, 500 Ukrainian soldiers are being trained in military tactics at an American base in Germany this time. The training is aimed at learning complex tactics that would make Ukrainian soldiers better at launching offensives and counteroffensives and all around fighting Russian attacks. Then in some other news, so Slovakia handed over the 8th Zuzana II howitzer to Ukraine. Another 16 are under construction, and they're being financed by Germany, Norway, and Denmark as well. That's the third one. It's also often referred to as one of the most advanced Western heavy weapons delivered to Ukraine so far. These things are hailed as quite the howitzer on wheels. That is to say the least. Then in some other news, so Russia admits a $47 billion US dollars, so just in US dollar figures I'm talking here, $47 billion deficit in 2022, despite record high prices for oil and gas last summer, around July, August times. However, because Putin bluffed about turning off the gas taps around July last year, Europe secured alternative sources for the most part, causing Russian natural gas prices to plummet, to really tumble there, thereby making Russia's upcoming 2023 budget deficit to make the 2022 deficit be completely dwarfed in comparison. As really now, Russia has much less demand for their commodities, oil and gas, which is something that they would normally use the profits on to fund their war machine. So maybe they're like the new Venezuela. Lots of hydrocarbons to sell, but the world market is just not buying them. Then in another Russian military mobilization blunder that I know that so many of you like. Now, I didn't have the time to get the subtitles for this one today, but just one look at this scene and I bet you already know exactly what's going on here. That's right, another appeal from Russian mobilized soldiers who are complaining to their military leadership that they feel deceived. Now, instead of the rear positions promised, they are sent to the front lines. They complain half of their personnel has been eliminated in Kreminna. That's interesting. And, as sad as it is to see, they actually think that this has been some type of clerical mistake or error that's been made. And if only they reach out and communicate with their upper military command, that these mistakes will all be rectified pretty instantly. But in reality, they are right where command wants them to be. Then in a bit of a quick funny today to round it off with, so a Russian truck got overturned while carrying cone pyramids as they attempt to rush them to the front lines. I don't know for sure where, but based on everything I see, it's probably Zaporizhzhia. And just look at the quality or state of these cope cones. Just white Russian copium, typically seen with rusted steel, and in this case with concrete degradation on every single one of them. So can I ask you guys just a little bit of a question? Why is an invading force setting up these really cheap and crappy defensive maneuvers with these really crappy cope cones? I don't know why. I'm scratching my head here. So thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button. Again, thanks for all the support, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.